Welcome to Asia Pacific Defence Reporter, your go-to source for cutting-edge security insights in the region. Get ready for rapid-fire analysis and commentary from the Asia Pacific with your host, Kim Bergman.
Hello and welcome back. I'm speaking to you from a hotel in Newark, a rather run-down part of New York City, and I'll be coming to the USA in a moment. But first, I thought I'd have a few words about an inquiry that has been announced into the Australian Submarine Agency. This came out in the media last week. It wasn't announced by the government, but a couple of journalists broke the story, and it's subsequently been confirmed. Anyway, the review is going to be conducted by Dennis Richardson, former Secretary of the Department of Defence and former Australian Ambassador to Washington, and I know him moderately well. He is one of, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying this, one of the most pro-US figures in the defence security field. And so this is not going to be any sort of fundamental review of AUKUS, unfortunately, in my opinion. But this is the world that we inhabit at the moment. So I expect that the review will just focus on the mechanics of how well or poorly the Australian Submarine Agency is functioning. Now, the key figures in this, Mr. Richardson himself and Vice Admiral Jonathan Meade, the head of the ASA, they know each other very well, and they have been involved in a number of matters, probably most significantly the Hunter-class frigate program evaluation, and in my opinion, neither of themselves particularly covered themselves in glory on that one, and I say somewhat cattily that there are still major question marks around that evaluation, including missing crucial documents, an unprecedented lack of value for money assessment of the bids, and most improbably of all, a totally skewed risk assessment that put all three designs at the same level of maturity. And this was simply wrong. The winner, the British Type 26 frigate, was very much a paper design, and the other two being evaluated, the Italian Frem and a modified Hobart-class ship from Navantia, were both in the water. So there was absolutely no equivalence between them at all. Yet Jonathan Meade, Dennis Richardson, and some others came to the conclusion that they were equally low risk. Nothing could be further from the truth. And that deeply flawed process is why we are in the complete coat rodeo of C-3000, and for the first time since 1976, you will have to buy warships from a foreign designer built overseas. So in this, I think it's a bit rich that Mr. Richardson is sitting in judgment of Vice Admiral Meade, but there you have it. Now to happier things, and I'm in the US on a media tour organised by Lockheed Martin, along with some other journalists, and as you would expect, it's heavily oriented towards projects that are connected with Australia. So let's, and I'll be writing about these in a great deal of detail in the coming weeks. So this is just an overview, a preview, so to speak. So the first stop was in Fort Worth to get an update on F-35 production and the block, what's known as the Block 4 upgrade. Now, people watching this space very closely will know that the RAF's final 9 jets were caught up in what's called Technology Refresh 3, which meant installing new computers, 3 new computers to be precise, that were a necessary precondition for the Block 4 upgrade. Those jets were stored in the United States for a while, and now aircraft watchers in Newcastle say that 6 of the 9 have been delivered, and I would expect the final 3 will be in Australia before the end of the year. Now, this Block 4 upgrade is huge. It's a new radar, a new distributed aperture system. That's the thing that allows the pilot to see, in inverted commas, through the aircraft so that there are no blind spots. And in fact, there are more than 70 changes to the aircraft. When it was designed in the 2000s, the F-35 systems were calculated to be 10 to 15 years ahead of the opposition, namely the best that China and Russia could field or were expected to field. However, over time, that advantage has been gradually whittled away, and while the aircraft still outperform everything else, the margin of that advantage has been gradually reducing. The Block 4 upgrade re-establishes that performance advantage. Of course, it's always possible that there'll be some sort of radical technology breakthrough that would change that dynamic. That can never be ruled out. But from what we can see today, the F-35s will continue to have a capability advantage well into the 2030s, at which point presumably a Block 5 upgrade will be underway. Now, strangely, the program still has a few critics, even though more than 1,000 aircraft have been delivered and new orders keep on coming in, most recently from another 3 NATO members, Finland, Poland and Romania. Also, Israel is looking to buy more of them, and as operations against Syria and Iran are currently showing, F-35s can easily defeat the latest Russian air defense systems. For the few remaining critics to argue that somehow they are not as good as they are is to be suggesting that there is some sort of vast international conspiracy underway with about 15 different operators lying about their performance. And I think it's time for everyone to accept that the F-35s are performing exceptionally well and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. I've always said that the Defence Strategic Review got it wrong in ruling out additional F-35s, and now with the Block 4 upgrade, I think that's even more the case. Given that the Navy is really struggling to contribute to the defence of Australia, I would be redirecting all, at least most, of the money that we are currently in danger of wasting on nuclear-powered submarines into areas such as strengthening the RAAF. To be fair, I don't think we have yet reached the point of giving up on AUKUS Pillar One, but it's getting closer, and I would certainly be holding off committing more resources until a few major issues become clearer, such as whether the US will be able to increase the rate at which they are building submarines. At the moment, they are not even close, though I do accept that there is a lag between committing money and seeing the full effects. Now, on that quick calculation, a Virginia-class submarine is equipped with Mark 48 torpedoes with a 250-kilogram warhead and Tomahawk surface attack missiles with a 450-kilo warhead. A submarine carries a mix of these for a total of about 40 weapons at sea. And the variants that Australia is hoping to acquire, remember the deal is that the first 2 will be second-hand submarines. Similarly, these will go to sea with no more than 40 weapons per submarine. You can't rearm them at sea, so basically that's all they have when they leave port for a 3-month cruise. Now, the Mark 48 torpedoes, in total that's about 5 tons of ordnance on 20 weapons, slightly more for the Tomahawks, 9 tons for 20 Tomahawks. So that's a grand total of 14 tons that could be fired at an enemy in 3 months using 40 weapons. That's, again, just a fact. That's not me speculating. Now, without getting overly technical, with the advent of precision-guided munitions about 20 years ago, what now counts is the number of weapons you carry and not necessarily the size of the warhead. Basically, a few kilos of high explosive hitting a target directly will do far more harm than a couple of 100 kilos exploding 10 meters away. A single F-35 can carry 6 weapons internally, meaning that 6 or 7 F-35s in a single mission can deliver about the same number of weapons on an enemy as a Virginia-class submarine can do during a 3-month mission. An F-35 can carry a lot more than that if the weapons are also mounted externally on pylons, and in such case, just 2 or 3 F-35s can deliver as much as a single Virginia-class submarine. Now, you don't want to carry weapons in that configuration because you increase drag and you lose stealth, but it can be done. So think about that a bit more. F-35s can return, refuel, rearm, and continue conducting airstrikes on an enemy day after day. And we have 72 of them, which combined with air-to-air refueling gives them a huge amount of range. So what would you rather have? 40 warheads at sea for a 3-month cruise, or hundreds of missiles and bombs every day being rained down with pinpoint accuracy? Now, of course, submarines have other advantages. Attacking other submarines, you can't really do that from an F-35, and they can do covert surveillance, and so they are still extremely useful to have, and they are a powerful deterrent. But people have to stop believing that they are the only solution to Australia's defence needs. Now, if we were to look at an even more futuristic formula, and we decided to acquire some B-21 strategic bombers, they, for example, could easily carry 40 small diameter bombs out to very long ranges, which means a single B-21 with just as many weapons as a Virginia-class submarine could carry out that mission at a fraction of the cost. Now, speaking of cost, we're not sure what a B-21 is going to cost, yet, because it's still in development, but we can be very precise with the F-35. That's 82 million US dollars. That's 130 mil Australian. I'm very well aware of that disadvantageous exchange rate being here in the US. And I'm fairly certain that in the unlikely event that we will ever receive a Virginia-class submarine or anything like the schedule that we want, we will pay $3 billion even US, 4.7 billion Australian. Now, that is more than the cost of 30 F-35s. What else? An F-35 has a single pilot. Virginia-class submarine has a crew of 133. And to labour the point, with F-35s you can keep refuelling and rearming them day after day, while our second-hand Virginia-class submarines are plodding along at a cruising speed of about 50 kilometres per hour. Have any Australian politicians ever tried publicly to tackle these straightforward issues, to explain to the Australian people why we're getting nuclear-powered submarines at huge expense rather than other things? To my knowledge, that's never happened. It's just a continuous repetition of the same old BS about submarines being the apex predator of the seas. Now, the actual arguments for and against F-35s versus Virginia-class submarines is way more complex than what I've just cantered through. But as far as I'm aware, not even this sort of basic level of comparison has been done. And I would really enjoy watching somebody like Defence Minister Richard Marles explaining to a sceptical audience why a Virginia-class sub with 40 weapons is worth 20 times the cost of a B-21 bomber with the identical number of bombs and missiles. And the next stop was Camden in Arkansas to have a look at HIMARS production. Again, this will be the subject of a separate, far more detailed article. We saw the production line, and we had a ride on one of the modified trucks that is virtually identical, or indeed possibly totally identical, to the first one that Australia will receive in February next year. As I say, I'll have a bit more to say about that. And it's instructive to see the production line here, where the rockets, the GMLRS rockets, are coming off the assembly line at a rate of one every 12 minutes. And a factory will be set up in Australia in the next couple of years to locally produce these. Next, we went to Atlanta to have a look at C-130Js, and the quick background is that Australia is spending a lot of money, $10 billion or thereabouts, purchasing 20 new C-130Js to replace 10 retiring C-130Js. Now, the Lockheed Martin briefers were very well prepared, not a surprise there, since they had advance notice of my enthusiasm for a competitor, the jet-powered C-390 from Embraer, that I've spoken about earlier in the year. But for the purposes of this podcast and the article, it's fair enough to focus on what Australia is currently receiving rather than crying over spilt milk. The 20 Australian C-130Js are arguably in the most advanced configuration of any yet built, and they have a number of features, RF countermeasures, JetWave SATCOM, improved software, an EO-IR turret under the nose, universal refueling, a new cargo loading system, a new galley. And by the way, for this I'm indebted to my colleague Nigel Pittaway, who knows far more about aircraft than I ever will, and he helped generate that list. But since I brought the C-390 into the conversation, even though it flies faster than the C-130J, the J has the advantages in fuel economy by somewhere between 20 and 40%, depending on the configuration. Also, another advantage that I hadn't previously understood is the responsiveness of the propeller-driven engines. The engines run at a fixed speed. I didn't know that. And you make the aircraft go faster or slower by changing the pitch of the propellers. And that's something that can be done fairly much instantly. With jet engines, there's typically a delay of a second or two between changing the throttle settings and feeling the effects on the aircraft. So that gives you some performance benefits with short takeoff and landing in particular. The first Hercules flew in 1954, before I was born, and they are still being built, currently with a 3-year production backlog. This is the longest production run of any military aircraft in the world. The basic design was so functional that Lockheed Martin engineers say if you started today with a blank piece of paper, you would almost certainly come up with something very similar. A straight-wing, 4-turboprop engine aircraft, and with a cargo compartment of similar size. The final stop of the week was at Moorestown to receive an update on Aegis. This is for the Hobart-class destroyers, which will soon begin an upgrade to what is known as Software Baseline 9. By the way, the word Aegis can mean a number of things, such as the big flat panel radars on the ships or the combat management system that tracks targets and fires weapons at them, and in the case of the Hobart class, it's both. The move to baseline 9 and the addition of SM-6 missiles to complement the current SM-2 missiles means that the ships, amongst other things, will have the ability to protect themselves and assets within a couple of 100 kilometres from ballistic missile attack, as well as a large variety of airborne threats. Lockheed Martin has a team of 140 Australians working on Aegis, and that number might grow because they are also supplying most of the combat management system for the Hunter-class frigates. I'll just conclude with a very few quick thoughts about events in Syria and the end of Bashar al-Assad. This is a major setback for Russia and also from Iran. It's too early to precisely predict the future structure of the government, but like Lebanon, Libya and Iraq, while the external borders will remain the same, the country itself might well end up as being a series of separate self-governing areas divided along ethnic and religious lines. Bashar al-Assad won't be missed. He was a mass murderer who used poison gas on his own people, probably killing about 500,000 in total. There are 10 million Syrian refugees, 3 million in Turkey, 7 million in Europe, as a result of the civil war that started in 2011. So hopefully he will die of a horrible disease while exiled on the frozen outskirts of Moscow or in an Iranian backwater village. Unfortunately, it will take a long time to undo the misery and suffering that he has brought to the Syrian people, with, of course, the exception of his minority family clan. Okay, that's it from the US. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye for now, and see you next time.
That's today's Asia Pacific Defence Reporter. For more in-depth articles, expert opinions and exclusive interviews, visit AsiaPacificDefenceReporter.com. Stay informed, stay ahead. This is your source for all things defence. Until next time.